Greetings, this is Fallonheart, and welcome back to Monster Hunter Wilds. Before we get into it, my credentials. That right there, I love showing off, that is my Monster Hunter box. Look at all that shit. Like, original PlayStation 2 game as well. That thing is almost as old as I am. Now, look, what is the most prevalent monster there, right? The most prominent monster. It's the Rathalos. Now, why is the Rathalos my favorite monster? What is most people's favorite monster? It's the flagship of the first game. Got a friend that started in Free U. His favorite monster is Lagiacrus. Gee, I wonder why. Rathalos in the first game was fucking brutal. Fucking brutal. In fact, I'd go as far as to say that Rathalos in Monster Hunter 1 on the PS2 is probably the hardest fight in the core game. Now, I never went online with that game. I missed out on a lot of the online-only content. For many years, I didn't even know that the PlayStation 2 could connect to the internet. I had no idea until long after the game was dead. I didn't really have the internet back then. I just played the games, and if I couldn't finish them, I couldn't finish them. If I couldn't figure out, I couldn't figure it out. I just kept trying, or I gave up. Monster Hunter was a game I picked up off the shelves because the box art was really fucking cool. There was a guy facing a badass dragon with a goddamn sword made out of a goddamn giant-ass jawbone. Badass! Why'd you think I'm a great sword user? The game was brutal, and it did balls at teaching you how to play. The game was so bad at teaching you how to play. Yeah, there was a basic tutorial, but for a brand new player, the game was still wildly confusing. But I was so enamored with the world that it kept coming back. And for a while, I always kind of got locked at Rathalos, because I couldn't beat it. After a while, I did actually manage to defeat the thing. And that was one of my favourite moments in my gaming history. I love it. And ever since, every single new Monster Hunter game, it is a tradition of mine to get a full set of Rathalos armor and a Red Wing Greatsword. It is my tradition. It is the flagship of not just Monster Hunter 1, but the main icon of the entire series. There's a reason why they've stopped doing this now, but for many years, every single time there was a new flagship, they showed how tough it was because it kicked the ass of Rathalos. Rathalos was the proof of how tough these new creatures were. That's why it's my favorite. Now, a lot of people these days really don't, you know, think of Rathalos the same way I do because they don't have the same history with it. My second favorite monster in the series is Nargacuga, for similar reasons. Generations Ultimate was awesome, especially as a solo player that didn't have any friends playing this series. Why? Because it added the feline companions, now known as Palicos. And they were such a massive boon for a solo player who didn't have any friends playing these. When I played Monster Hunter, I did everything on my own. Everything on my own, including the online quests. And because of this, because these games were so difficult, I never made it to G rank. I didn't make it to G rank until Free U. Now, why particularly Free U? Because that's when I finally convinced a friend to try the series. And he likes the series now as well. Free U was the first game in the series I played with a friend. And we finally got to G rank. I can edit a clip here on me finally getting to G rank. So fucking excited playing this game.
Dude. Finally gonna get to G rank. Hopefully, if we do this.
G rank.
G rank. It's been so long. I've waited so long for this moment.
I haven't. It's been 2 months.
Not for bloody me, it hasn't.
Well, it would be technically a year for me since I started the game after the internet sorted.
This is the same character that let's do it. Freaking.
Oh, it's way a bit longer.
No! I always get to G rank, right? Yes.
Have I put on ready? Andrew.
Have I gone? Have I gone?
Come help me.
I have loved Monster Hunter for a long time. Long before I even touched G rank. And even now, the only game in which I've ever completed it 100% is World. Because they've made it so fucking easy. And again, yeah, I have friends that play the game, but I still don't really have friends that play it like I do. A lot of them move on to new launches or get bored. And this is especially more difficult because, well, these days, these games are live services, and no one's going to stick around for each and every patch. Even I eventually got burned out with World. I missed several patches, and came back long after Iceborne launched to finish that. So why the hell am I still unbelievably enamored with this series, even though I never reached the true part of the game, G rank? Because the core gameplay of Monster Hunter is one of the most unique and without question the most satisfying in the history of gaming. Hunt, kill, carve, craft, get stronger, hunt stronger. That is the core loop. Until, at least it is until Wilds. Wilds have completely changed that loop. But the reason why I mention all this, because I really want to address some of the arguments I've been seeing. And I generally do believe that most of these people are either brand new to the series with like the last 3 entries, or they've just not played the old games for so long that they've just completely forgotten. Right? So, when did the series start getting easy? Well, it was after Tri. The difference between Tri and Free U is kind of massive. Free U is the combination of Monster Hunter Tri and Monster Hunter Portable Third. In Free U, you get a base plus 50 defense. Naked. Base. Because of the mixture of Portable Third into the Tri mix, you also have far more opportunities to gear up, to get better weapons and more powerful weapons. When you face a Rathalos in Free U, it is considerably different to when you face a Rathalos in Monster Hunter 1. Why? You've got a hell of a lot better shit. You've also got more tools at your disposal, and you have 2 companions that join your side that can each do something unique. They can heal you, they can buff you, they can trap the monster. The natural progression of this series has been adding more features, and over time, this has inherently made the game easier. What a lot of people kind of seem to always jump on is saying, oh, well, you've just got better at the game. Just saying that completely ignores all the many changes that have happened during this series. As the series have gone on, you have farms now, so you can farm potions and farm resources, so it saves you a lot of time that way. You have companions in most of these games that can help you out in combat and distract the monster, as well as quite often do extra bonus things like buffs and traps and healing and so on and so forth. Movement overall has improved over the years. Obviously 4 being the big one, adding jumping attacks, which is something I personally have been wanting to do ever since the first game. The amount of time I wanted to jump off the ledge just outside of the Rathalos' nest in the first game and smack that fucker on the head, like, you have no idea. So, the fact that we eventually got the ability to do that, oh, I was made up. Why'd you think 4U is my favorite game in the series? 4U contained so many monsters throughout the entire series. It contained a plethora of completely new type of monsters, including the swinging monkey type, and the bugs, and so on and so forth, and completely changed movement in a way that didn't feel limiting like the water in the 3rd generation, but also wasn't too overpowered, unless you played an insect glaive. Monster Hunter has done a brilliant job at introducing new mechanics and making the game just more fun and just cutting down on a lot of the tedium in certain areas. Now, the problem with cutting the fat is that you can only do so much of that before you're left with no fat at all. And to make a delicious meal, you need at least a little bit of fat. World cut a lot of fat. It cut a lot of fat. It got rid of the requirements to carry paintballs. It got rid of the requirements to carry freaking pickaxes. It got rid of the requirements to carry whetstones. It got rid of a lot of these little management things. It also added more freedom of movement, not just basic running around and climbing, but in attacks. I'm a greatsword user. When I attack, I have to be purposeful. If I aim in this direction, I hit in this direction. In World, I can alter that direction slightly. And you would not believe how much powerful you are, how much more powerful you are when you can alter the direction of your attacks. You can then fix little mistakes so that even if you're not directly on the target, you're still going to hit it. And the better you get at the weapon and the more you learn about the monsters, the higher the chance you are to hit. Even if you get the hit off, you're still probably going to hit it because you can move after your strike. That is such a tiny change that only a long-time player will notice, but that adds a lot. They've made so much of these little incremental changes over the years, and then tweaking what doesn't work to try and make it work better next time. For example, the movement in 4U was a response to the movement in Generation 3. Well, not everyone, but a lot of people hated the water because it felt so awkward and limited, but they still wanted to give people that extra dimension of movement. So 4U happened, and that was so successful, it stuck. People also liked the mounting. It just needed a little bit of tweaking so it didn't completely stop combat when it was happening. There's a plethora of things like this over the series, and throughout the history of the series as well, every new mechanic that Capcom has ever done in this series has been overpowered. They have a history of doing this. Every single time there's a new armor ability, or a new weapon type, or a new, like, you know, like game gimmick, it is pretty much always over-fucking-powered, which is why the Insect Glaive was so broken in 4. It was a new weapon, and it featured the new mechanic. It was unfucking-believably broken. But this happens, this is fine. This is why the Raptor is broken in Wilds. You know, it's just what they do. It's to make people use this new mechanic and enjoy it. And then later on down the line, if they still keep it and implement it in some way, they will tweak it a little bit so it's not as broken, right? So there is far more to this series getting easier over the years than just you as a player getting better, right? It's way more than that. Let's talk about Wilds. In Wilds, you can kill the tutorial frog monster with a lance by just blocking. Because the block, at least against that monster, I haven't checked it further, but the block against that monster takes basically no stamina away from you, does not hurt you in any way, does not knock you back, and does damage to the monster because you auto-parry. Now, it will take a while, but I have proof on my channel that you can in fact just block and auto-parry that fucking thing to death. There is a noticeable AI change in how these creatures attack. A noticeable AI change. And I think I'm one of the primary people to notice this more than anything else. Monster Hunter has a series of skeletons. And every single monster in the series is based on one of these skeletons. Every now and again we have a brand new monster like the one I'm focused on right here called the Nuudra that has a completely different skeleton we have not seen before. Generations 4U had the insects such as the spider, Nocella, the little buggy things I forget the name of, and so on and so forth. Now these had different skeletons, brand new skeletons, but ultimately if you're facing an Azura or you're facing a Lagombi, you're facing the same monster. If you're facing a Rajang, or if you're facing that Scorching Simian there, you're facing the same monster. Now, they're not going to have entirely the same moveset, but you can judge inherently how these creatures are most likely going to move based on the design and the skeleton they use. Now, part of the game being easier the more you play it is recognizing these skeletons. A brand new monster I've never seen before, I already know many of the moves it is going to do just by looking at the shape of its body. Once it starts moving and I recognize what body type it's using, what skeleton it's using, I have a decent idea. The monkey there is going to throw shit. It's probably going to have a hand bash move. The like, Azura or Lagombi is going to have a random charge move, right? The Spider Boss is going to do this. It's going to lift its pedipalps up, it's going to pause for a minute, and then it's going to strike. Every single monster has these repeating things. The Leviathan body type, Lagiacrus, for example, or the March... no, where is it on this list here? Sansi Surges. That also uses the same skeleton as Lagiacrus, the Leviathan model. The long body. That will have a move in which it curls up and twirls and twists its tail to attack you. It curls up to make you go in towards it, and then it attacks with its tail. Every single monster from a specific skeleton will use very, very similar moves. Now, they won't be exact, but they will be similar enough that you can already predict what it's going to do and have an idea of how to attack it. That's why brand new monsters such as the insects in 4U and this new octopus here, which is a fucking amazing fight, my favourite monster in the game so far, is what makes that so special. Because for a veteran of the series, this is a brand new experience. You don't know what it's going to do. And the beauty of Monster Hunter is it doesn't have a health bar. Doesn't have a health bar. You know how weak the monster is by the way it behaves. Is it drooling? It's low on stamina. You know? You know how the monster is going to act by how it behaves, how it moves, how damaged its body is. Monster Hunter is all about observation. You observe the monster, you see what it does, and you react accordingly. You explore and observe your surroundings. You try and pick up a bit of everything to learn what these things do and how you can use them. The endemic life, especially in Rise onwards, adds more to this by adding animals within the environment that you can observe, interact with, and use against your enemy. I forget the name of it, but the electric spider in Rise can be used as a, like, random shock trap. So there are certain beetles pushing around balls. Some of them can be used for explosives. This is one of the ones that's in Wilds as well. The endemic life system was really, really cool for that, because it essentially just added more stuff to observe in the wild, as well as more stuff to use against the monsters in the hunts. It is a series about observation. You are a monster hunter, a monster tracker. You track them down, you learn the environment, you master the environment. That is what the series has always been about, rewarding observation. Wilds goes against this by placing you on a raptor that immediately takes you where you need to go. Now, this is a mode that can be turned up, so this isn't a big deal. What is a big deal is the railroady story that does not let you explore. It does not let you explore. If you go too far away, it will pull you back. It will pull you back. You cannot explore. When you're on one of those follow the NPC missions, the only thing you can do is follow the NPC and slingshot any resource within reach. That's it. That's all you can do. The game actively discourages exploration and learning your environment. You barely travel across the forest area in particular at all before you move on to the next one. And if all you're doing is going to story to story to story, which is, to be honest, the bulk of the game, because very rarely do you get a chance to just go out and hunt, and when you do, it's only the creatures you've unlocked in the story, which is so slow and limiting that it does the exact opposite of what the core of this series is. Now, when the game does, in fact, let you play, it's fantastic. I'm loving it. Some of the older veterans are still disappointed about how easy it is, and we'll get into that. But I'm loving it. Now, I'm loving it when I'm actually playing it. That octopus fight in particular was fucking fantastic. It was a brand new experience. The Sultan of the Sand. We've seen monsters like this countless times before. The basic Wyvern monster is a staple of the series and is often some of the best monsters in the series. But you know what? Really fucking cool fight, right? The Forest Outlaw, the first time you face that in the game, super atmospheric. Thunder and lightning going on everywhere. So cool. The Let's see, where is the other one? I'm trying to look at the names. Is it Dance of Shadows? No, that's Narcella. I think it's Bugging in the Clips, maybe? Whatever it is. The one that is a, the Royal Ludroth skeleton one. The big, like, purple fish thing that uses water as armor. Again, super atmospheric fight. You're surrounded in heavy rain. The water effects are gorgeous. The game is amazing once you actually get to play it. So I'm not sitting here on this channel hating on this game, right? If I hated this game, I wouldn't be fucking talking about it. I would have moved on. I love Monster Hunter, so I'm going to criticize the things that I don't like. Why? Because this is a series that has historically fixed things the community doesn't like in the next iteration. One thing I do not want the next Monster Hunter game to have is this amount of focus on story. Do not basically bench your gameplay in favor of this story. Monster Hunter players have never and will never choose following NPCs in a highly restrictive way over the core loop of the Monster Hunter series. They never will. Now, I want to address some of the things I keep seeing when it comes to difficulty in the game. Number one, we hear this every game. Maybe because it's true. Maybe because it's true. Maybe the games are getting easier over time and in more ways than just extra mechanics. Monster Hunter Wilds is a game that gives you Divine Blessing right away if you choose the New Hope armor, which most people are going to do because it's the new set of armor and it looks really fucking cool. It does not tell you what abilities it has at the start of the game. You find this out later. It also allows you to get really powerful very quickly. One of the first weapon upgrades I had, which I think was from the chicken, the raptor chicken. I'm pretty sure it was from that one. Correct me if I'm wrong. It gives me like 100 and something fire damage and a little bit of an affinity. That is wild. It also inherently comes along with skills. I think a level 2 punishing drawer or something like that. Weapons in this game have armor skills built into them. That is insanely powerful. This means the Envoy Rose boss at the bottom there, the monster I knew about before going into this that I was super excited to fight, spent all of its time on the floor. It didn't land many hits on me at all, and when it did, it was just because I was charge attacking non-stop. Charge, slap, charge, smack. I didn't bother to really maneuver. I just walked up to the monster and kept doing that over and over again. Why? Because the rest of the game has posed no challenge, so why bother playing properly when I can just keep doing that? This resulted in this monster being on the floor constantly. All the time. I barely got to see the fight. I was never paralyzed once because the area of effect thing it does doesn't even seem to do that. I even tried running into one during my first impressions and it did nothing. They tout paralysis. They give you the tools to know that this thing paralyzes and it just didn't happen. Bug, maybe? I don't know. But this fight, the monster spent the entire time on the floor. The only monster that I did that to in World was the very first, like, lizard thing that looks like a stunted Royal Ludroth. That thing was a piece of piss and always has been. But the rest of the fight, the monsters at least fought back. I have not had a fight in this game like an Anjanath just yet. Anjanath, again, despite not being remotely new, it uses the same skeleton as Devil Joe, still was a good fight at the start of the game. Now, I have had tough fights at this point. The octopus, being a new skeleton, really good fight. The Scorching Simian, the monkey, that's a lot like Rajang. Yeah, that was a decent fight. I had to watch myself in this. So, at this point in the game, I have got to the point in which, right, okay, we're in basic low rank difficulty. The Veiled by the Tide fight, that was it. The Veiled by the Tide, that's the one. I can't remember what the Clips one is. The Veiled by the Tide one, Dance of Shadows, Scorching Simian, and Creeping Flames. they were all fights in which I were like, okay, I am going to have to focus now. Nursella can do a lot of damage with the poison. The Veiled by Tide can do a lot of damage just in general based on what you've got at that point. The Scorching Simian is relentless, like every monkey typically is like this. Like the Rajang body type is relentless. So, again, and this is not a monster that is good for greatswords. Like, you can kill every monster with every weapon, but this specific skeleton is typically not one that's an easy time for greatswords anyway, so I expected that one to kick my ass a little bit, and I had to focus fighting that thing. I've lost connection, apparently. That is fine. Okay. I'm not playing this game online anyway. So, we have hit a point now in which the top fights, all of this, were what most of this should be. Now, I expect the early Raptor to be a piece of piss. They've been basically using the exact same playstyle for a long time. Every single now and again, you get something a little bit different, like that one that hops around a little bit. But for the most part, these Raptors are exactly the same. Maybe they have some elemental or status-like thing on top of it. But for the most part, the Raptors are fine. This thing, the Cachocabra, whatever it is, this is basically the equivalent of that Stunted Royal Ludroth from Worlds. Again, it's a piece of piss. I don't expect it to be super difficult. But after that, I do expect some of these monsters to be, like, you know, to be a little bit more than brain dead. The Rose, the spider, should not have spent the entire fight on the floor. But part of that, again, oh, it's just you getting better. Part of that isn't just me getting better. I had a weapon that, I've got a feeling this thing's weak to fire damage. I don't know yet. It's a spider made out of a rose, so I assume so, just by logic reason. But I should not have a weapon, especially a greatsword, that early on, that does elemental damage, especially a high amount of elemental damage, and has affinity. I should not have a weapon that early on that does all of those things. On top of having inbuilt armor skills like not critical draw, something draw. I forget what kind of draw thing it has. Is it savage draw or something? It's not critical draw, I don't think. But it doesn't matter. Like, it basically is a great armor thing for a greatsword that, like, end game armor sets in World would have for greatswords. It's crazy. This is more than just I'm getting better as a player. There is fundamental mechanics changes to this series that is reducing the difficulty. Now, a lot of people are saying that, so it's not that. Secondly, a lot of people are saying, oh, this is low rank. Why are you complaining? It's low rank. Low rank is the tutorial. Right. First of all, low rank is not the tutorial. I think that's a very modern way of looking at it. In the older games, low rank had tutorials. It taught you how to make a potion. It taught you how to cook meat. It taught you how to catch fish. It taught you the basics. The basics of things that you would need to survival. Because you would need to cook meat. Because, you know, we didn't have that shit in the base game. You had to do it in the field. You need to cook meat. You needed to learn how to fish. You needed to know how to make potions in the field. That was one of the things they simplified as well. I can't remember on what game, but at a certain game, blue mushrooms were no longer needed for potions. Potions were instantly made out of a single herb. That was one of the things they did to ease up the process by removing the requirement for blue mushrooms. So again, that's one of those mild mechanics changes that made the games easier because it reduced effort in order to get a fundamental item. But where was I? Sorry, I've lost my track a little bit there. But no. In the original, in a lot of the older games, there were a multitude of quests that they added at the start to teach you how to play the game. By the time you were in, I'd say, the second star quests, you were in low rank. Low rank was the easier part of the game, but it wasn't the tutorial. It was far from the tutorial. Too many people in this day and age, now that they've reached G rank, which is now called Master rank, have this mentality that G rank is the real game. This is the same mentality a lot of people have with MMOs. Why are you, like, these are the same people who will rush through the entire MMO and get to endgame to just grind the same boring shit over and over again and then complain that there's no content. If leveling your character in an MMO from 1 to whatever the cap is not a fun part of the experience, then your MMO is dog shit. If the only experience in a game that is taking you a long time to do is endgame, then your game is trash. Getting to endgame, the process from beginning to end, should be fun. If it's nothing but a boring grind, then it is not a good time. This is a terrible modern day mentality to have. Monster Hunter, keep in mind, I played this series long before I reached G rank. And I have enjoyed pretty much every single entry and spent hundreds of hours in every single one of them, never reaching the end game. The only one I have ever 100% finished is World, because I could solo the whole fucking thing because of how easier they made that experience. Now, a lot of people say, oh, well, that's a good thing. Well, in a sense, sure, that is part of the trimming the fat thing. I get to see parts of the game I never would, but that doesn't make me think any less of the older games, because the core experience of fighting and getting better equipment and, you know, going after bigger things up until a point where I just didn't have the skill to go even further, or up until a point where I just needed people to help me kill shit because it was tuned for more players, like on the online stuff. Because again, that's one of the changes that were made. Before World, the canteen quests, the online quests, were tuned differently by default. So it was inherently harder to do it on your own. They were tuned for at least 2 people. Sometimes even more. Do you understand now why I never reached G rank until I had a second person playing with me? Yet, despite never reaching what many of you now consider the main part of the game, I still had an absolute blast because the core experience of Monster Hunter is fucking amazing. Why has that changed? Why is the rest of it just stuff that can be thrown in the trash and forgotten about because the only point of the game is G rank? And if that's the case, then why the fuck are we buying the game until they add G rank? Why isn't G rank part of the core experience inherently, and it's something we have to buy as an expansion later on? If G rank is the core experience of Monster Hunter, then why isn't it in the game by default? Because it's not the core experience, and this is a modern world mentality that a lot of you have. That was never part of the game. Just like the whole build system. One of the really cool changes World made was to the armor system. They simplified a lot of the armor abilities, and in doing so, actually added a lot of depth in order to make custom sets. Now, custom sets were a thing that always existed. Some of the most powerful combinations in history were often used, right? Like combining certain sets to get certain armor abilities so you can like one-shot or very quickly kill some of the toughest monsters in the series. This has always been a thing, but it was never the core experience. This was always something that players that were heavily into the community and the community forums that had like had a full group of people to do it with would do in G rank to farm the end game stuff. This is not something that was a core part of the experience. This was just one option that like very knowledgeable players did right at the end of the game. World is different. World allowed you to mix sets and make really powerful combinations right from the get-go, which is a very, very cool system. They simplified the armor skills, but also opened them up for player imagination to do all kinds of crazy shit with. This was a really good change World did, because they did more with armor skills than any of the games have done. They made them less of a forgettable feature. Most of the series, armor was basically acquired for elemental resistances, and if there was any negative traits on them, you would often just gem them out to negate them, because these skills often worked in fractions of like 10%, 20%, 15%, that kind of thing, each percentage giving them a stronger effect. And there were negative traits as well. So typically speaking, you get a full set for the elemental resistance, and then you gem out whatever negative item or negative effect you had on the armor. But World really did make a cool change there, because it added a lot of variation in how you could build various sets. So I understand builds becoming a thing, but if you were brand new to the series, you essentially just viewed Monster Hunter like an MMO. Which it never really was. Yeah, it was online multiplayer, but Monster Hunter is really unique. It is its own genre. There is no other game like this. It's not an RPG. It's not an MMO. The closest thing is the very generic action game category, which doesn't really explain it. Monster Hunter is a Monster Hunter. Just like Dark Souls is a Souls-like. It is its own genre and can't really accurately be placed in a lot of these things. So a lot of this mentality comes from people jumping into the series in World and then just treating the game like an MMO. The fact that World also made the series a live fucking service contributed to this as well. Prior entries were complete. They were just complete games. You didn't have to wait for the rest of the game to be unlocked or, you know, downloaded. It was a complete, balanced experience. You had no arms race with the developers versus the players, where the players tried to make the most overpowered build they possibly could, and then the developers introduced new mechanics and buffs and debuffs in order to counteract the players getting too powerful for the game. There was no arms race, it was just a complete fucking product. You bought it, you played it, every month you get some fun event quest shit that did silly things like really teeny tiny monsters or really, really big monsters or something like that. And you'd get a few, like, crossover stuff or fun stuff to play around with. But ultimately, the bulk of the game was already there. That's what it used to be, a complete product. Remember when we used to buy games and they were complete products? That's what Monster Hunter used to be until World. So, again, so it's not just because it was low rank. This is a modern, like, brand new player kind of mentality. Low rank is just an easier part of the game. It is not the easy part of the game, it is the easier part of the game. It is not the tutorial, it contains the tutorial and then the easier part of the game. But that doesn't mean it was easy. Back in Tri, the Barroth gave me a hard time. You know that big orange stony, like Tyrannosaurus monster that you guys probably kicked the ever-living shit out of? Yeah, that was tough in Tri. That was tough in Tri. That was a hard fight. Low rank, by the way. One of the first monsters you come across. That was a tough fight. Why was it a tough fight? Well, because you don't have the things you have now. Your movement was more limited. Your companions were more limited. Your armor and equipment were more limited. You didn't have the base 50 defense that Free U added. And generally speaking, you had less tools at your disposal to take it on. And less buffs in general. It was a harder fight. This isn't just me as a player getting better. It is mechanically a different fight. Same monster, mechanically very, very different. So it's not just because it's low rank. Low rank isn't the tutorial. Again, this is coming from people who think G rank is the bulk of the game. It's not. Right, what's the next one? What's the next one everyone talks about? I think I've covered it, haven't I? G rank is the bulk of the game. Low rank is the tutorial mode. Wow, low rank is easy. Cool. Go and play some of the older games and then come back to me with that. Yeah, I think that's it. But on top of that, let me just state this outright. Yes, the game is unequivocally, it's undeniably easier. Anyone that says otherwise is just coping, or they just don't have the experience to know. It is undeniably easier. Does that make the game bad? As someone that plays these games not for challenge, but because I find the core combat and general loop of the Monster Hunter experience to be one of the best, if not the best, in gaming history, no, it doesn't. I don't really care that the games are getting easier. Admittedly, I think the games at this point are getting a bit too easy for me, to the point where I'm actually getting worse at the game. I noticed this post-World. I'm actually getting worse at Monster Hunter because of the mechanics changes, because I don't need to play like I used to play. I'm at the point in the game where I don't use barrel bombs, I don't use grenades like flash bombs or anything like that. I don't use any of this shit because it just makes the fights trivial. I'll use it when we get to the point where we're fighting like the real high-end shit when I have to, but up until that point, what's the point? It's just a waste of time and resources. I never use this shit. You know, I've noticed that I'm actually getting worse at the game because the games are just casualizing the experience so fucking much that I don't need to do anything. I can go into one of these fights, summon an NPC support, sit back and watch, and I will win the fight. That is not my skill getting better. It's not. That is the game giving me so many tools that I have practically acquired God mode. Now, I don't have to use the SOS. I'm not using it. I don't have to use the SOS. I don't have to use the superpowered weapons. I don't have to use Divine Blessing. You know, I don't even have to use the Palico. But the fact that I have to purposely nerf myself that much in order to have a normal Monster Hunter experience is kind of stupid. You know? It's kind of stupid. Most of the time, people only do that to prove something to people. Look, I've been playing this game since the first game. I don't have to prove dick. I soloed a lot of the online stuff. I never hit G rank, but soloing high rank online stuff from back in the day, that is impressive shit. Am I the best player in the world? No. But Monster Hunter is the one series I am damn good at. Why? Because I was put through fire. I didn't start these games playing World. I started these games playing the PlayStation 2 game. A game that is still, to this day, fucking brutal. You go back to that game, and I don't care how fucking experienced at this series you are, that game is inherently harder than anything that came later because you do not have the tools. You don't have a companion, you don't have a farm, you have much weaker weapons and armor, you have much less choice in weapons and armor, you have much less choice in area. The game is on, the analog stick attacks and the limited attack range. Also, the more simpler movesets. The Greatsword doesn't have a charge back then. You literally just swing it wildly. The Greatsword doesn't have a charge attack. It doesn't have that. You literally just swing it. That's it. That's all you do. You actually play a Greatsword in the original game like a new player plays in the more modern games because they don't know how to use it. It's weird using a Greatsword back then. The game is harder because you just don't have the fucking tools you do in the later one. This isn't, like, again, if it's just me getting better, then I should be able to go back to the first game and decimate it. But it does the opposite. That is a brutal fucking game. And even now, when I go back to the older games, like Free Ultimate... Sorry, I keep saying that. Freedom Ultimate. Right? Oh, sorry, Freedom Unite. God, so many of these games have similar names. Freedom Unite, where the Nagakuga was the flagship. That is noticeably more difficult. Try was the last truly difficult game in this series. But I don't mind that the games got easier after that. A lot of people are going to say World. World was another dumbed down, but Try was the last difficult game in this series. After that, things got considerably easier because they started making changes. They started giving us default sets, they started giving us default items, they started giving us like one of every weapon, so we don't have to spend resources to make them to try them. And most of these changes, quite frankly, were positive. Most of these changes were better. I actually like a lot of the changes they made to World in order to give you more options as you swing so you're not locked into one attack and you actually have a little wriggle room to aim. I like that I don't have to carry around a pickaxe. I like that I don't have to carry around paintballs, although I don't really like the Scoutfly system. I like that I don't have to carry around a whetstone, and these are just inherently part of my experience. I like this. I think this cuts down a lot of the wasted time and the grind and the bloat. I like the worlds in Monster Hunter World. I loved exploring the forest area. I'm not just some old school fucking hater that's like, oh, this game is easy, so much shit. No, Worlds is undeniably easier, but my biggest issue with World was that it was a live service game with microtransactions. World was the downfall of the series Not because it was easier, but because the core business practices changed. And because the game was so successful, it also changed the community. And the community was the best way for brand new players to get into this series. The best I ever saw of this was during the Nintendo era. When Nintendo had Tri, Free U, and so on and so forth for you, they had this online thing in the 3DS and the 3DS and the Wii U. Admittedly, this wasn't Tri because Tri was on the Switch, and this was before this this online thing. But the thing with Tri is, unlike Sony, Nintendo actually fucking advertised the game, which got new players. I remember Pro Jared and big channels like Game Grumps doing stuff for Monster Hunter Tri. Tri was the first time there was a noticeable increase in players. But Nintendo really did a really good job on the 3DS and the Wii U in introducing new players to the series. On top of that, we had this online, in-console social network full of brand new players and veterans. It was full of people asking for help and veterans offering to help them. The best introduction to Monster Hunter is an experienced player, because the games have always been shite at doing this. And a lot of people are saying with Wilds, yes, the experience is streamlined and dumbed down to this degree because they're really trying to get new players. Right, well, I made a post on the Steam forums about the hand-holding that they do in this game, and one of the guys responded to me saying, Wilds is his first game, he has no idea what to do. He has no idea what to do. He has no idea of the point in anything. He's viewing the game like an RPG. He's expecting to kill things and grab loot from them that he can wear. But it's like all the enemies are dropping are useless items. So I had to explain to him the crafting system, the different sizes of monsters, the armor crafting system, the weapon crafting system, and the core thing of the game. The problem is that Wilds isn't the core Monster Hunter experience. Wildly, Monster Hunter Stories is closer to the core Monster Hunter experience than Monster Hunter Wilds, which is more like a Monster Hunter story. It still does a fucking awful job at introducing new players to the series, because it is so busy and focused and determined to grab your wrist and drag you through a story that it never bothers to actually stop and teach the player the fundamentals of what the Monster Hunter series is. What the core loop is, what the experience is. And for those new players that might be watching this, the core experience of Monster Hunter is observation. Now, the newer games don't push this as much, but essentially, it is paying attention. The monsters don't have health bars. You know how weak they are by observing their movements and learning what they do when they're weak. You can only capture one when they're weak enough. If you try and capture a monster by trapping it in a trap and throwing tranq bombs at it, it will just get out. It won't work because it's not weak enough. Think of it like a Pokemon. You need to weaken it first before you capture it. Monster Hunter is about observation. You explore and observe your environment, you observe and, basically find the weak spots of monsters and you exploit them. You can cut out various parts of their body for extra rewards, you can capture them, you can damage various parts of their body, and it has the core loop of you gather materials, you make better weapons and armor, you use these better weapons and armor to take down bigger threats, you kill those monsters, you carve them up, and you make better weapons and armor. And that is the loop of Monster Hunter. And it's so simple because this is an old game series. It is so simple, but the core loop is unfucking believably satisfying. The reward system of Monster Hunter is cool weapons, cool armor, and cool fights. That is the core loop. But the problem is, Wilds isn't that. The loop of Monster Hunter Wilds is cutscenes and dialogue and following NPCs around. And every now and again, while you're following an NPC around, it will give you the chance to fight a monster. And then immediately, you're back to cutscenes, dialogue, and following NPCs around. This is a completely different Monster Hunter experience. Like I said, Monster Hunter Stories actually does a better job at explaining the Monster Hunter formula than Monster Hunter Rise. In Monster Hunter Stories, you start off with your companion, a monster you ride on. It's basically your Palico, it'll help you out in combat. It's a turn-based game, but what's the core of Monster Hunter Stories? You go out there, you explore, you observe the monsters, you learn their weaknesses, you learn what the various egg patterns will hatch into, and you get better monsters, and you explore more and learn your environment. Monster Hunter Stories is actually a better Monster Hunter game in its spirit than Monster Hunter Wilds. And this, again, this isn't just me hating Wilds. This is me hating the focus of Wilds, because when Wilds actually lets you play, it's amazing. It's great when it lets you play. But the problem with Monster Hunter at the moment is that the community has completely changed. The community has completely changed. The community in the West used to be a very, very small, passionate, wholesome, friendly community. In my years of playing Monster Hunter, I had only ever run into one asshole. Say that about any game. And I met that one asshole in Tri, when it started to reach a new audience. Now, since World, most of the fucking community are assholes. Why? Because the Monster Hunter community has become the Dark Souls community, where everyone is concerned by showing people that they have the biggest fucking dick. Look at me, I can do the most damage in this tiny amount of second with this amazing build that I got from a YouTuber. Yeah, and you die like that, because you're focused on DPS and not survivability. Like, you run in, yes, you can do a crazy amount of damage, but the monster can do a crazy amount of damage to you. What kind of character do I make? One that has earplugs, one that has, like, wind pressure resistance or earthquake resistance. Basically, I make a character armor set that can essentially reduce or outright remove many of the hazards I will face. This won't boost my power, but it will boost more attacks that I can do. The less the monster stuns me or stops me in action, the more damage I can do. And the more damage I can take if I also build for a little bit of defense. Meaning if I do fuck up, because I'm not perfect, I'm going to be okay. Meanwhile, Mr. I can do godly amounts of damage in one attack is also dying in one attack. But again, our community has become the Dark Souls community, where everyone is trying to do the most amazing combo. Everyone is trying to have the most damage in one hit. Everyone is trying to be the best. It's a co-op game. You're not playing PvP on Monster Hunter. You know what the best player is? The best team player. Or the best player that can take shit on his own. Not in the shortest amount of time, but with the least fuck-ups. That's the best player. Not the one who is diving in there, doing insane combos, posing for the camera, uploading it to YouTube. Look at the build that I got from this random YouTuber that has only started to care about Monster Hunter since Monster Hunter World, and the game got pretty graphics. The community has changed. The community has changed. I have seen so many get good comments. It's crazy since World came out. That was never a thing. You know what the Monster Hunter community did when somebody was struggling? They helped them. They taught them how to play. They told them about an item that you could get to maybe unlock or a monster to kill to unlock an armor. They told them about armor sets. They told them some weapons are better at fighting certain things. If you want to fight a Diablos, probably better to have an impact weapon than a slicing weapon if you're struggling that much. Maybe if you're really struggling against the Kirin, use a ranged weapon that keeps you away from its bullshit, or use a faster weapon so you don't have to stop that much. Now, if you're a diehard like me, you stick to the greatsword throughout the entire experience, but that's really only something you do when you fall in love with a specific weapon and stick to it regardless. But what did the Monster Hunter community used to do? They used to help out their fellow hunters. What did the Monster Hunter community do now? What the Dark Souls community does? Get good, scrub. Well, actually, I can handle it, no problem. And the irony is, a lot of the people complaining about the difficulty are also these people. Right? I'm complaining about the difficulty because it has got to the point now where I am actually suffering in my own skill level because the game is set in a brain dead mode. I have noticed myself get worse at the game because I don't have to be better at the game. I'm not getting better as the series is going on. I'm getting worse because I was locked on hard mode and had no option to escape beyond learning the game, and now I am locked on story mode with no other option. So inherently, when you don't have to try as hard, you get worse at it. But ultimately, the difficulty doesn't bother me that much because, again, when the game is actually playable, when you play the game, it's great. You still have that moment when you hit a monster. When a monster charges towards you and you smack it in the head and it's... that is still one of the most satisfying feelings in the game. Once you kill a monster for the first time and get to run over to the crafting station and see what you can make out of it. Whoa, that armor is so cool. Holy shit, that weapon is badass. Fucking octopus dude. Like, case in point. That is still in the game and it's still amazing. That core reward system of kill new shit, craft new cool shit, look like more of a badass, go out and face even harder shit. And yes, at this point, the octopus, the monkey, Nocella, they are normal low rank difficulty now. I am actually needing to focus more. So, and believe it or not, I have actually died. I died against the octopus, and I died against this tide thing. I've died twice so far in the game. Because I had learned bad habits. You've seen my fight against the rose spider if you've watched my first impressions. I'm not trying to dodge out the way. I'm not really observing the monster all that much. I'm just running in and attacking and like charge, hit, charge, hit, charge, hit. And it's getting downed constantly because my weapon is just so powerful. It's getting downed constantly. It's not really doing anything to me. And when it does hit me, it's really not doing any damage at all. Hell, its paralyze ability, which I'm sure it has, doesn't even paralyze. So what's happening? I'm learning bad habits. So when a fight comes along in which, you know what, I should actually pay attention, I'm not doing it. Now what happens to a new player? I'm somebody with years of experience in this series. What happens to a new player? Some people are saying, well, nobody's going to continuously play this game if they die all the time. Have you seen the success of Dark Souls? Have you seen the success of Dark Souls? Nobody's gonna play this game if they keep on dying. I'm sorry, what? Me! Fucking me! Monster Hunter 1 kicked my ass! Monster Hunter has been kicking my ass for years! It wasn't until Gen 3 that I really started to get pretty fucking good at the series. Monster Hunter's been kicking my ass for a long, long time, and I got better over the years because I was facing challenges. I learned more about the core experience. I got better at my weapon. But it still challenged me. Even a little bit. And yes, in low rank. Yes, in low rank. Which is apparently just a tutorial. There is much more to this series than Wilds is letting people know. It is teaching people bad habits, and new players are eventually going to just come across these monsters that they struggle with, and if you're right that they're going to keep quitting if they keep dying, then yeah, it's going to eventually happen. So what do you want? Do you want them to enjoy a super satisfying game? Or do you want to put them on training wheels constantly, put them on God mode, and have them following around NPCs so when the challenge does finally arrive, they hit a massive difficulty wall that they can't get past because they've learned bad habits the entire time? Look, I don't want this game to be the hardest thing in the fucking world. I've enjoyed it even more since I got better at it, but the core element of the series is that combat loop. which Wilds does not have, because they never let go of your hand. Now, I'm still in low rank. It might be the case that they stopped doing this in high rank, but why are they doing this? World didn't do this. World is the one everyone refers to because World is the one where we had the most new players. World didn't do this. World had a bit of an intro. You know, it taught you the basics, so on and so forth. It actually does more to teach new players than this game does. All this game does is dumb everything down and give you God mode, essentially. But World actually did teach a few things. I think World became a successful game for several reasons. First of all, pretty graphics. Second of all, relevant systems. Third of all, YouTubers jumped on it and put up the hype wagon. A lot of YouTubers taught people how to play more than we had anything else. I think prior we only had like what, Gaijin Hunter and one or two small channels teaching players, and really you weren't going to find Gaijin Hunter if you're already invested in the community anyway. You know, I remember, I think there was a podcast, a YouTube channel I used to watch back in the day called Teamwork Cast as well. That was really fun. I don't think they do anything anymore, but again, the Monster Hunter community was tiny. You didn't really get Monster Hunter YouTubers. But World succeeded because of pretty graphics, relevant system, YouTubers jumping on board to teach people how to play and drive up the hype and so on and so forth. And because, yeah, a lot of the game was streamlined. It cut up some of the fat, it got rid of a lot of the bloat, but Wilds has cut off all the fat. There's no fat left anymore. There's just bone. And the flesh. You want the flesh of your meal, the meat of your meal? Well, you're going to have to get through all the bullshit first before you can reach that. You know, this is a fucked analogy, but you get my point. Like, World did a better job at introducing new people. And it was less to do with the game and more to do with the community, which had changed. And that is why the community of Monster Hunter as a whole has changed. Because unlike my generation of Monster Hunter fans who learned by just playing and then later on had some interactions with online, this new generation of Monster Hunter fans since World has learned from YouTube and Reddit and a bunch of other people that are just trying to make the best build ever with the best weapon, you know, and out-competing each other. That's why the community's completely changed, because their core idea around what these games are have changed. Tempered monsters, I think, are an interesting example of this, because what are tempered monsters? Tempered monsters are the most fundamental form of live service I can think of. They are the same monsters, just ramped up to 100 in the settings. What is a really, really shit way of adding difficulty? Increasing the stats. What are tempered monsters? Increase stats. You want to know how to do a good extra difficulty? Dread King fucking Rathalos. Don't just increase the stats. Give it new moves. That's what divergent species are. Like Azure Rathalos and Silver Rathalos. They have new moves. They play in a different way. They're designed, not just because it's a cheap way of and simple way of making a new monster, but they're designed to play on your muscle memory with fighting the more regular version of the monster. That's what they're supposed to do. What happens when you get into the high rank? You're going to run into monsters you've never seen in low rank. That's going to increase the difficulty. They're going to have more devastating moves. Big area of effect shit. Maybe grabs. What happens when you get into G rank? Well, same thing. You're going to encounter monsters you've never encountered in the lower ranks before. Yeah, the stats have improved, but they also improve along with you. You get better gear. Tempered monsters don't really do that. Eventually, if you fight enough tempered monsters, you can eventually acquire some really high-end gear if the drops are right enough. But tempered monsters don't do that. Tempered monsters are literally just the same monsters, but beefed up with max stats. That's it. That's why I don't really like them. They are the fundamental live service idea. Well, our players have been beefed up beyond belief because of our systems. Let's make the ultimate challenge for them. What's the ultimate challenge? A shit ton of stats on the monster. Huge health, huge defense, huge attack. That's it. You want new abilities. You want new abilities, you want new moves, you want new monsters. Not just beefed up stats. Yeah, beefed up stats come part of it, but it has to be more than that. And with high rank and G rank, what happens? You make better armor and weapons. It increases that reward system. You have new like, appearances for your armor. Even if it's the same armor, the same monster, it looks cooler. The G-rank version of Rathalos looks way cooler than the basic version of Rathalos' armor. It's the same armor, but more abilities, more stats, cooler look. It further adds to that progression of reward system. What do tempered monsters add? You might get some gems that you want to put in your socket. Now, this might have changed, because I never played Sunbreak, and I'm assuming they have tempered monsters as well. And I did a few tempered monsters, I did a few of the fights. As I said, I 100%ed World, I did everything. The only thing I didn't do in World was, the Last Dragon, you know, like the big challenge that's in like every Monster Hunter game. I've done it in past Monster Hunter games before, but because this is like a live service model, I've not really kept up with the meta. So, I didn't really have what I needed in order to take on Fatalis. That was it. Or is it Fatalis or is it the other one? I can't remember. The big black dragon. He's been in a multitude of the games over the years. I've killed him several times before, but again, this isn't built for that. It's a completely different experience because it's a live service game now. So Fatalis was very different to what it was prior, and I just couldn't be arsed with it, to be honest. I didn't do Fatalis, and I didn't do Behemoth because Behemoth just wasn't a Monster Hunter fight. But everything else I did. Like, I've soloed the whole lot of it. You know, I played a little bit online, mostly when I was farming material. I played a little bit with friends, but for the most part, I soloed the whole experience. And it was nice being able to do everything myself, but yeah. The core experience of Monster Hunter changed. Monster Hunter has had, like, 3 major changes over the years. The first one is from the PlayStation 2 games to the PlayStation Portable games. There was a big change there. Between PlayStation 2 and PlayStation Portable, the games became less of a survival experience. They added more ways for you to kind of, like, tackle the challenge. But ultimately, it was still the same game. The PlayStation Portable versions all the way up to Free U. By the time we got Free U, that's when things really start to simplify, but they did it in such a way where they were really just giving people more options. They were giving people more options, and it was noticeably getting easier at that point, but as someone who soloed the whole thing, to be honest, I actually appreciated the games getting easier, because it was still a challenge. I could just do more. I could see more of the content. Then World came out. Complete night and day. Their live service, the community changes, the streamlines, like, you know, getting rid of a lot of the busy work stuff, the easier combat, the beautiful worlds, the high fidelity textures, the realistic look of the monsters, the endemic life system, the more hub-based areas rather than the segmented maps. World was a huge change. Then Rise came. And Rise was a incomplete mess. Rise was more of a Spider-Man game or a Devil May Cry game. It was focused on parries and combos and web slinging and not really Monster Hunter. The content that was there was stripped of most of the Monster Hunter kind of experience. No fishing quests, no egg quests, nothing like that. I'm pretty sure World got rid of some of that as well, if not all of it. I just didn't notice it as much as World because World was such a different experience. Whereas Rise, on the surface of it, was more in line with what prior Monster Hunters were, but, like, stripped of all content. It was just fighting, and that was it. And the actual fighting was so focused on being a combo machine than being Monster Hunter that it lost a lot of the weight and the impact, and it was just flashy. And on top of that, Rise was largely just microtransactions. If you bought all of those microtransactions, I'm not talking about the expansion. The expansion is fine. I will take expansions adding G rank over buying the game all over again and starting from scratch any day. The expansions are a great idea. I'm glad that they've done that. Iceborne, great. Sunbreak, I never played it, but yeah, the idea is great. But the microtransactions, you bought all of those, it would add up to the cost of the actual game itself like 3 or 4 times over. They exploited the ever-living shit of that game. On top of that, the updates got lower and lower and lower, and any free stuff we got were just stickers and things. They took the piss. And again, if you're an old-school player that used to get everything from day one, and then get free updates, and never have to spend a single dime on microtransactions, Rise was an insult. It was an insult. And now Wilds has come out, and unlike Rise, the core game experience is fucking great. when you can get to it. Yeah, it's easier, and in some pretty obvious ways, beyond just low rank being low rank, me getting better at the game, so on and so forth. But the core gameplay is still fun. The problem is it won't let you do it because it's too busy trying to tell you a story. Most of the new player experience in this game is following NPCs, cutscenes, and being talked at. And then just shoving you into fights without much explanation. The game doesn't explain shit still. So any idea that they've made these changes for new players is ridiculous, because they're making the game easier, but they're not explaining to people what the point of the game is or what they're expected to do. Okay, hunt monsters. Fine. How? If you're a new player, how? Potions, you just get given. What happens when you run out? Don't know. You get given the whetstone. Do you know how to use it? No, not really. It just doesn't do this. And yeah, there are pop-ups in the corner, sure, but the game series has never, at any point, taught people how to play. They've had to just learn, or, how I've done for friends, show them. Go on in hunts with them, tell them the basics of the game, and leave them to figure the rest out. Because the best way of getting into Monster Hunter has always been the Monster Hunter community. And that was true for World as well. But now that the community has changed so much that they just want people to know how big their dick is, that it's harder to do. Because people are more likely to say get good than actually help new players out. Meanwhile, the games are just getting easier. I'm not actually teaching people how to play the game. It is a thing the series has always struggled with. But right now, I will tell you my exact thoughts on World. Very, very simply. Sorry, Wilds. Wilds is a fucking great game when it lets you play. I love the octopus. I love seeing Narcella again. I love the new weapons. I love the new armor. I fucking adore the raptor. I love the raptor as much as I love the palicos. It's great. Wilds is brilliant when it lets you play. When it lets you play. This is a game I'm going to keep playing through the updates. It is a game I'm going to keep enjoying. But that doesn't mean it's a game I'm going to be a sycophant for. It's not a game I'm going to just suck its dick all the time. I want Monster Hunter to be a good series. I want it to go back to being what it was. It's never going to happen because they make too much money out of microtransactions. And they have to produce... They don't have to produce as polished an experience now that it's a live service game. Because live service inherently means in-fucking complete. Selling an unfinished product. So they don't have to. Because now the games are more popular than ever before. It will never stop annoying me that this series got popular when Capcom had to deliver less and get paid more. It will never stop annoying me that that's when this series become popular. Why didn't it become popular in 4U? Why didn't it become popular in Generations? Why didn't it become popular in Tri? Or Freedom Unite? That's right. That's right. Pretty graphics. Because gamers have shown us time and time again that pretty graphics sells games. And game developers know this. This is why you keep getting pretty looking shite over and over and over again. Dragon Age Veilguard? What was the best thing about Dragon Age Veilguard? The her physics were gorgeous and the environments were pretty. That was it. They would be really good at making screensavers. I'm sorry, but I love Monster Hunter, and because of that, I'm always going to be their biggest critic. Because I remember when they used to be better. They used to be way better. Now, that doesn't mean their games are shite now. I personally didn't like Rise, but because the gameplay was nothing like Monster Hunter. But at least this, when they actually let you play the game, is good, you know? But yeah, I think this will be my last ramble for Monster Hunter Wilds for a while. I might stream a little bit of it at some point. I'll definitely stream a little bit of it at some point. I'll show off the SOS system and how you don't need to do anything when you summon them. You just have to kick back and enjoy the show, really. But, no, I will stream some of it at some point, especially when I can just enjoy the game. You know, when I don't have to deal with story. Because I will just get angry with the story. Although when story's going on, I can at least talk to chat. But I legitimately do really like Wilds, and it will be on my top 5 this year. I highly doubt Wilds is going to miss out on that, because it is a good game. It is a good game. The difficulty discussion doesn't ruin the experience for it, right? And I think a lot of people fail to understand that you can criticize something without hating it, right? I'm going to criticize this game for how much it's dumbed down the experience, but I still love the game. I still think it's brilliant. You know, I will heavily criticize the game for its focus on story over actual Monster Hunter gameplay, but when I can play the game, it's still great. So it will be on my top 5 this year. It's not going to be number 1, because there's a game that's come out already this year that tops it. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. It won't be my number 1, but it will definitely be on my top 5 this year, because unlike Rise, I'm actually enjoying the game. But even with Rise, there's plenty I can praise with that. I think Rise had the best art style. It was bright and colourful, but also had the detail that World introduced to the series. It was the perfect combination of classic Monster Hunter and pretty graphics and detail. I loved the Palamute, even though it wasn't as good as the Palicos. I loved the layered armor system being a core part of the game that you could unlock, which hopefully this one have as well. I loved, like, every new monster Rise introduced. I don't know about Sunbreak, but in its core experience, every new Rise monster was a top-tier monster. From low rank to high rank, every goddamn new monster in Rise, except the Spectacle Fight Flying Dragon ones, because the Spectacle fights are almost always boring. Except the Spectacle Fight, like, floating dragon things. Every new monster in Rise was really, really fucking good, and I'm hoping to see some of them in this. I'm really hoping to see some of them in this, because the Rise monsters were great. So even with the only game in the series I do not like, I can sit here and praise it. I've heard a few things from Sunbreak that I really like. Apparently there's a werewolf monster that's right up my alley. A friend of mine's told me. There's also NPC companions, so you can take NPCs out on the hunt with you instead of just the Palicos. That's a nice little feature, and then the more you hunt with them, you eventually get to know them, and they, like, unlock unique armor or weapons for you or something like that. That's a cool little system. I like that. You know? Pretty cool. Even with the game I, honestly, quite frankly, hate, Rise has some good points, and I'm not going to shy away, like, praising it for that. So, that's what you're going to get from me when it comes to commentary on this kind of thing, right? You're going to get... I'm going to praise a game where I think it deserves it, and I'm going to shit over a game where it deserves it. And I don't care if it's my game of the year, or a game I think is one of the worst of all time. Again, Veil God is one of the worst games of all time. It's personally a game that insults me because Origins is one of my favorite games of all time. But I'll at least praise it for its gorgeous hair and its pretty, like, backdrop environments. There's nothing else I can praise it for, but I'll praise it for that. They're gorgeous. The people that made it should make wallpapers and screensavers for your computer. So long as they stay away from character models, they'll do a great job. But, yeah, that's what you're going to get with me with this series. Like, and in general with games. And the thing with Monster Hunter is because I've been playing it for so long, I know a lot about it. I'm the same way with Pokemon. I love Pokemon, but I'm going to shit on it when it deserves it. Because I'm not a fanboy that will just consume all the product and then get excited for more product. I'm not a fanboy. I'm a fan. I know the history of this series. Just like Pokemon, I've been with it every step of the way. I know the history of it. I know how good it can be, and that's how good I want it to be again. Doesn't mean every game that comes out past its heyday is shite, because that's not the case. I can still enjoy these new entries, just like I can enjoy Pokemon Sword and Shield or Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Even if there are colossal problems with those games, I can still find things to enjoy. But I'm not going to shy away from shitting over it when it needs to be shat over, because hopefully, if enough people like me complain, then they fix it in the next game. And this is a series that has a history of doing that. Things that do not work, and a lot of people bitch and moan about, get changed in the next one. So I am thoroughly convinced that they'll go back to the drawing board with both the difficulty of this game and the way they handle story in the next entry. Why? Because that's historically what this series has always been like. They have fucked up multiple times, and they pretty much always do a better job the next time. Why was Rise the way it was? Because people loved the more anime fighting styles that you could do in World. The, like, spin the bottle, like, attack things on the dual blades. The weird shit that you could do with the hammer. The parries and whatnot that you could do with the longsword. People love the more anime-esque, like, Devil May Cry combo stuff that you could do in World. So they went full-on into it in Rise. But they did it too much. A lot of people eventually complained about that, so they've dulled it down a little bit in this one. You can do wild shit in this one as well, but it's not as combo focus heavy. You see what I mean? They fucked up with the water combat in Generation 3, and that's why we got the aerial combat in Generation 4. And that was so well received, it stuck and became a core part of the series. Even now, when they're doing scummy shit that I don't agree with, like the microtransactions and the live service shit, even now, they're still implementing changes based on what they think the player base will like. And I can see it. People loved the story in World, even if it was generic. People memed on, where's my Dragonator? And all that kind of shit, right? They loved the creepy alien bastard from Iceborne. People liked some of the story elements. People memed on the story elements, so they went in on it in Rise a little bit more. People liked the story elements of that, like the girls and whatnot, so they went full on into it in this game, and they've done it too much. Right? Nobody plays Monster Hunter for the story, but if it has an enjoyable story, that's a good thing. And here's the thing about Wilds, right? Here's the thing about Wilds. The story and the characters are actually pretty neat, right? I like the characters. I've got no problem with the kid. I absolutely understand why he's angry and upset. He's just lost his family. As far as he knows. I am assuming they're alive, but as far as he knows, his family is dead. Everyone he's ever known growing up is gone. He's in this weird new area with admittedly nice people, but of course he's upset. Of course he's angry. I like a lot of these characters. Yeah, they're tropey and basic, but I do like a lot of these characters. I like the whole going from different biomes and meeting the new cultures, like the Wubbabubs, and like the black people from the underground fucking, like, you know, fire community thing. I like the Native American people with like the bone horns that ride around on raptors. It's got the Generations feel of everywhere you're going having its own unique culture that you interact with. And I loved that about Generations. One of my favorite things about Generations was going through the history of the series, basically, with all these different cultures. And that's what this is doing. I like the whole Journey of the Center of the Earth story this will inevitably end up in, where you go to this random world that no one has ever seen for centuries, right? That's probably where it's going to lead based on the story so far. I don't know whether that's the case or not. I like the characters. I do like the story. I like what it's doing. I hate the execution because it stops me playing the game. If this game had the same story but handled it more similar to how they did in World, or to a lesser extent Rise, then I would love this game so much more because they let me play the game. They focus on the gameplay and have the story as flavor. But at the moment, they're focusing on the story and they have the gameplay as flavor. And that's the wrong way to do a Monster Hunter game, right? So, even the story, I like the story. I like the characters. I despise the execution. I despise the grip it has on my wrist. I hate the fact that it never lets me go. And when it does let me go, there's no point because I can't just go on new hunts and unlock new hunts. I have to go through more story to unlock new hunts. So the core rhythm of this series is shattered. But I think at this point I've repeatedly covered everything, right? I'm obviously, my last video I did where I went on this big angry rant because I was so sick of the story and the hand-holding and the way it's being done. Hopefully, I'm going to link this video underneath that one because that one's starting to get a little bit of traction. And hopefully people come over and watch this one because this is kind of like a little bit of my history with the series, my love of the game, showcasing that I know what the fuck I'm talking about, and kind of like what I want from this series, right? That's what I want from this series. Monster Hunter is my favorite game series of all time. And I will never stop being upset that it's become another live service game that doesn't release complete and is full of microtransactions. But unfortunately, that's just the reality of the series, of the modern world. I will continue playing Monster Hunter until it gets to the point in which I cannot play it anymore because it's gone too far off the rails. I played World of Warcraft for many years, and I eventually left when it took too much of a piss, right? I left Elder Scrolls Online recently because it was taking the piss. Once Monster Hunter truly starts taking the piss, I'll stop playing it. I've still got the old games. To this very day, I have the PlayStation 2 one up there. You can see most of them up there. Like, let's shove the camera on again. You can see most of them up there. You know, some art books. You've got some of the 3DS games there. The only game that is not up there physically is World and Wilds, because they're the only games in the series so far I've got digitally. I've not got physical copies of them. But I've been playing these games for a long time. I love them. And even when this game has some major weak points, I still love it. I still think it's great. I'm just really frustrated with its focus. Right? I think a lot of the people are focusing on the difficulty aspect too much. Now, that doesn't mean that the difficulty complaints aren't legitimate, because they are. But I think they're focusing on that a little bit too much. The reason why they're focusing on the difficulty are not the reason why the games are easier. The reason why the games are easier is because this game has terrible pacing, and it gives you too much power right from the get-go. On top of that, the general AI is a bit lacking. They've added, like, a baby mode at the start of the game, and around the time you get to, like, Conga, it starts to get more like what the normal Monster Hunter experience was, right? So, before I go, I'll repeat it again. Low rank isn't the tutorial. Low rank traditionally contain the tutorial, but by the time you're in, like, 3-star quests, you're in low rank. Just low rank. Low rank is not easy, it is the easier part. Barroth in Tri still gave me a hard time in low rank. Right? Still gave me a hard time in low rank. First time playing through Monster Hunter 1, the fucking, first big monster you fight, the Velociprey, kicked my ass multiple times. It is not the easy mode. It is not the tutorial. It is the earlier part of the game. Is the earlier part of video games the tutorial mode? Or are you just starting to play them? Like, surely a game should have a level of challenge all the way through, right? To a certain degree, it should have enough challenge that forces you to engage. It should have enough interesting stuff that's going on the screen that forces you to engage. And this series used to have that. Yes, even in World. I know specifically Tobi Kadachi fucked up a lot of people. Because it had stunning moves and it was fast. And at that point in World, they hadn't faced much like that. And because of the extra movement the player had in World, the monsters also had extra movement in World. The monsters weren't as stiff in World as they were in other games. So yes, World was easier, fundamentally, because of the mechanics changes, but it wasn't easy. It wasn't the tutorial. It was the earlier parts of the game that are inherently going to be easier than the later parts of the game. Secondly, G-Rank isn't the bulk of the game. If it is the bulk of the game, and if it's the only fun part of the game, then the game is shit. Endgame is not the game. It is what you play when you reach the end of the game. Getting from the start of the game to the end of the game should be just as fun as the end game. No, it is not just a case of people are getting better. There are fundamental mechanics changes and tool additions to the game that has made the experience better. Sorry, made the experience easier. In some ways they've made it better, in some ways they made it easier. Again, like, I think 3U and 4U and Generations, 3U, 4U, Generations are the best games in the series. And they were the ones that came in after the initial easy changes. 3U onwards added additions to the series that made these games easier, and I think they're the best games in the series, the most well-balanced games in the series, and the best ones in terms of, like, content and mechanics. They don't lose a lot, they gain a lot, they're just a little easier as a result. And I think they're the best ones in the game. So, a game series getting easier is not fundamentally bad. There's more things that go into it than just simply, oh, it's easier, right? So, there are the things I kind of want to address. If you watch this entire thing, thank you so much. Generally, I love this series, and part of me is glad that we've got more people jumping on into it, but at the same time, I do lament what the series used to be. The series was at its peak in the Nintendo days, because that's when we had more people jumping on board, but we still had the core gameplay, we still had the complete games, you know, we still had the wholesome, welcoming community, and they were just better. The Nintendo era was a nice combination between the hardcore difficulty of the original games and the more modern convenience of the world games onwards, right? It was the nice medium between those two. But, with that said, thank you very much for watching. This is probably going to be the last video I make talking about the series. Well, talking about Wilds. I don't think that I really have much more to say than what I've repeatedly said here, to be honest. I think I've got across my point quite well. I will do a video later on, once I've kind of, like, finished the game, and I've got to the end point. I will make a video then, basically saying, like, what I think after hitting the end of it. But more than likely, I'll kind of be repeating the same things, hopefully in a more positive way, because certainly changes has improved the experience. But, yeah, this has been Fallon Heart. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope that you're enjoying the game. In fact, I tell you what I will do before we continue, right? I can't promise that I'll be playing with a lot of people. I am, generally speaking, a busy person these days. Apparently, I have 45 messages. Okay. Am I online? I'm not supposed to be online. For anyone that has been watching the game so far, there is my profile. You used to have a code or something. There we go. If you're curious to add me, do so. I might get the time to play with people online at some point. I am a solo player. The only people I really play with is friends. But, yeah. I'll be willing to do that at some point, maybe. I might stream it. Who knows? Depending on, you know, if I get people or not. Probably won't. I'm a very minuscule, like, teeny tiny channel. I've been doing this for fun for years. But, anyway. Thank you very, 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 very much for watching this. I hope you enjoy. I am finally going to shut the fuck up now. Probably play some more Monster Hunter Wilds, because I am legitimately enjoying it. When I'm not following NPCs around.